it was important to show a possibility rather than a probability of what our past could look like.
So here's an opportunity to tell an authentically African story with an authentically African writer, authentically African director, and a team that really believes in cultivating excellence.
This is fresh, this is new, the thinking is new. Everything on Blood Psalms was a pure creation in its finest form.
You're dealing with 5 tribes and you need to find a detailed nuance, physical, a detailed nuance within the language, a detailed nuance within the people themselves. And the psyche and the mentality, it all comes into one.
The story I was trying to tell was the story of the Nguni consciousness, if I can look at it in that way. To say that here it was at the top of the food chain. It started to eat itself from the inside. And then I look at that exodus from the north all the way down here over a period of 2,000 or so years.
This genre specifically gives us a lot of information about history. If you're looking at period pieces, you're looking at Game of Thrones, you're looking at Vikings, you're looking at Rome, they all have a very specific cultural mandate that they're pushing forward. And often that mandate isn't based in absolute fact. But however, it gives the identity of those stories such a lot of weight.
The underlying theme in Blood Psalms is the preoccupation with end. It's set during the pre-Diluvian period. The pre-Diluvian period is the period before the flood. This is now the last days of that period, just before the cataclysm. That's the period I'm quite fascinated by. And I think we need to unearth and dig. There's a lot of evidence that shows that there was a lot of activity, especially in Southern Africa, around that period.
And like I said, it's difficult because we're not basing it on absolute history. And in fact, set 11,000 years ago, it's impossible to really absolutely obtain anything close to a truth. However, I think we've taken multiple truths and tried to create a world with those multiple truths.
I started then to look at Africa and try to connect the dots. And then by the grace of my creator, I was able to travel to Egypt. And it's in Egypt where it really sat for me. It felt like a part of me was there, a big part of me, but it wasn't the prevalent culture.
In the beginning, ancient Egypt was the vehicle because of its history and its intelligence and its advanced technology, creating a space where African people can take ownership of that identity as their own.
So that was our sort of starting point to try and basically do lots of research. We got in touch with the Egyptian Society, like different museums and stuff had people giving us information about olden days, but also the idea that there is technology that existed with the Egyptians.
Jamil went as far as, what words from ancient Kemet do we still use? And does Africa still use to this day that has the same meaning?
Throughout this continent, people seem to be using different words to say the same thing. And all how we describe ourselves is just by that simple term, black. Sutu means black. Kemet means black. Sudan means black. The list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. What if at one point in history and time, this place was just one space, without this westernized understanding of borders? And what if that one space was the mightiest of nations?
What Jamil also wanted to express on a visual level was how us as humans, how we get stuck on our virtues.
What we unpacked was that if you left and migrated from your home, either because you were forced to, or there was some cataclysmic event that purged you out of it, you would hold on to certain things. And whatever you held on to would then become the basis for your bloodline's belief system.
I was interested in the idea of how does one nation eventually become many nations? Even the psychology of how we get behind and create legend an identity and story behind these rallying calls of grouping.
The impetus for that within the research was always that there is a theory that the custodians or inhabitants of Kemet, or what is Egypt today, would have had to have migrated south in order to create the tribes as we know them today. And I think there is a lot of proof of the fact that nobody originated this far south.
And from that one house that ruled, from generation to generation, you start getting separation based on ideals, based on virtue and value systems and how you see the world. And then when we start to differ, then I find and I justify myself in my grouping and in my separation, which is what we've ended up with today.
So for us, it was about creating fictitious tribes because we don't actually know. And we thought it would be better to just attribute aspects of the research that we've done into 4 fictitious tribes for this particular season, in this particular realm.
When you design that kind of stuff, you don't want to just suck thumb and come up with, oh, well, it's fine, like they can have this.
Yeah.
You got to think about like what was their lifestyle like, what are the natural resources available, what's their history, what are they drawing on as references when they're creating stuff.
We spent a lot of time working on like material breakdowns. So we took each tribe and said, okay, cool, what are their resources? What is accessible to them? Who has shells? Who has leather? Who has metal? Who has what technology and stuff like that? And that material breakdown was then used for props fabrication per tribe, so that you end up with a consistent look ultimately, because you want it to be as realistic as possible to the viewer. And again, I mentioned earlier, talking about worlds, essentially each tribe becomes its own world, its own little entity.
The Akachi, they took the might of Kemet, they took the military prowess, they took the architecture.
The Uchawi are not only magicians or magical people, they are also scientists. They've got that edge. And friendship with the Akachi tribe means that the Akachi tribe then has access to some of their more scientific advancements.
And then the Trini were always made up of the people who didn't fit into any of the other tribes and migrated underground. But for them, what they've always kept precious is that they are the keeper of the secrets, the ancient wisdom, and they are the true descendants of Kush.
In the Chini caves, what's quite exciting is there are pools of bioluminescent liquid that is supposed to be like a phosphorescent type of thing, and the notion behind it is that the Chini have scooped up that liquid and harnessed it in a light bulb that they then use to navigate their way around the caves.
The Kua took the earth, they took the fighting, warring land, herding cattle, they took those kinds of elements of what they had known from where they fled from. Great Nzima Mabwe took kind of the political makeup of Kemet. They took in a bigger sense even the grandeur and the dress sense and that kind of heritage.
So what you have with all of these tribes is that they're all fighting for the name of Kemet. The Trini underground, they believe they're the true face and true children of Kemet. That those virtues are in their hearts, not in the gold and the splendor of the Akachi. You know what I mean? Who look like Kemet, but are they really Kemet?